we're ready to go.
We're ready to go. We just need to do a little housekeeping before we have to take we have to take attendance of our committee
Oh,
members. Um,
would you like me to stop the screen share then?
no, that's fine. You could leave it up. It's a good backdrop.
All right.
All right. So I'm Antonella Di Severio. I'm the chair of the Environmental and Sanitation Committee. I am joined by Judy Trilivas. I'm sorry, Judy, if I'm butchering your name.
Fine.
She's the chair of our Health and Human Services Committee. It's a joint committee meeting, and we have our committee members also joining who will be viewing this presentation, and I'm sure people outside of our board. So I've invited Stuart Cooper, who's from Fluoride Action Network, and please fix my introduction later, Stuart, if I mess it up. But he is here to tell us or talk to us about the National Toxicology Program report that came out, along with findings of other studies that show that even low levels of fluoride in our drinking water is a neurotoxin and detrimental to the health of small children, babies, and I would like to say the rest of the human population. So I'm going to let you. Oh, and then we also have Robert Olivari from DEP that can also weigh in with his comments after Stuart's presentation. Judy, did you want to add anything?
No, I'm actually here just to listen and learn.
Okay.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you, Judy. All right. Well, Robert, I'm sorry, Stuart, I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, I just want to preface the conversation here tonight by saying that FAN is dedicated to being science-based. When I say FAN, the Fluoride Action Network is science-based. My email is Stuart, S-T-U-A-R-T, @fluoridealert.org. And the reason I'm saying that is because if anyone has any questions or concerns, I'm happy to provide you links to the studies that I'm going to be discussing. I didn't have a tremendous amount of time to put the references into the PowerPoint, but they are in my actual presentation, which I will be sharing with the members here in a PDF. But again, I'm happy. I stand by the science. I don't hide from it. So my name is Stuart Cooper. I'm the executive director of the Fluoride Action Network. I'm based in New Hampshire, and I really greatly appreciate you guys letting me into your community virtually this evening. Now, I'm the parent of 2 young children who are afforded the opportunity to avoid ingesting fluoridated water or prescription tablets. And like me, they have great dental health. And while it's anecdotal, I mean, we hear a lot of anecdotal stories from those who support fluoridation. I'm 41. I've never lived in a fluoridated community. I've never had a cavity in my life. So it's obvious it's not completely necessary for optimal dental health. I'm sure there are people that have had cavities who never had fluoridated water, and people that live in fluoridated communities who have also never had cavities. But it's an anecdotal story. Our opponents do the same thing, and it's important to share that you can have optimal dental health without consuming fluoride. Now, who is the Fluoride Action Network? Why should you even care about tonight, right? Well, we were founded in 2000 by a group of concerned dentists, physicians, scientists, and parents with the goal of educating the public about the potential risks and known side effects of consuming fluoride, particularly from fluoridated drinking water. We're a public health and environmental watchdog group with over 5,000 medical and scientific professionals who have endorsed our efforts to protect citizens from overexposure to this chemical. And we're an international leader in this topic. I do want to point out, sometimes to really just get you to not even focus on the science, people say, oh, these guys anybody who opposes fluoridation are right-wingers. I can tell you, we're nonpartisan. Our leadership is made up of members of both parties, plus even some Green Party members. When we put in bills in late legislatures, most of the time our prime sponsors are Democrats, sometimes they're Republicans. We're nonpartisan, so don't let that myth exist. I'm also not going to let the myth exist that we're anti-vaxxers. People say that our organization has never taken a stance on vaccines or really any other issue aside from fluoridation. So it's important to get some of these myths that are out there in the world, to taken care of. And obviously, anybody who opposes fluoridation must be wearing a tinfoil hat and be a conspiracy theorist, right? You've heard that before. Go to our website. You will not see any conspiracy theories. I do not hear that. We work with scientists. We work with medical professionals, and we're science-based. And that's what you're going to hear about this evening. I think, well, what is the value of environmental watchdog group? Look at around, it's groups like ours that have, whether it's lead or asbestos or DDT or BPA, or recently PFOAs, right, in the drinking water. It's citizen groups and independent experts like us, not government authorities or industry lobbying groups, that are warning the public in advance of these toxins. So keep that in mind as you're listening to the presentation. What is water fluoridation? Water fluoridation is the practice of using the public water supply as a delivery system to increase the amount of fluoride residents ingest on a daily basis. How is this done? It's done by adding industrial waste byproducts known as silicofluorides. You guys, I think New York City uses hydrofluorosilicic acid. But it also can come, that's a liquid form. It can also come in a powder form called sodium fluorosilicate. Now, this is added to the public water systems during the treatment process to elevate the fluoride content to 0.7 parts per million. Now, throughout North America and the world, most fresh groundwater and surface water naturally contains very low trace levels of calcium fluoride, with an average concentration of less than 0.1 parts per million. That's 7 to 10 times lower than the levels added by your water department personnel. And when I say 7 to 10, because it fluctuates depending on water usage, generally between 0.7 and up to 1 part per million, sometimes even higher. I bring this up because you hear from those who support this that this is a natural process. And again, no, natural would be, in the vast majority of cases, trace amounts, almost undetectable. And they're increasing this 7 to 10 times. That's very unnatural. And with not calcium fluoride, which is naturally occurring, but fluorosilicic acid. Now, fluoride is regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency, not by the FDA when it's in your drinking water, but by the EPA, as a contaminant and a pollutant. Yep, that's how it's regulated. Naturally occurring fluoride in water can result in trace amounts, and in some communities at higher levels for sure. And that's done through the erosion of fluoride-rich rocks and soil by surface and groundwater. But fluoride can also be found in water as a result of pesticide runoff from agricultural operations, pollution from coal-burning facilities, and from production of various products such as steel, glass, ceramics, and semiconductors. Now, where do we get this 0.7 level? I do want to point out that prior to 2014, the recommended level was up to 1.2 parts per million. A lot of people may not realize that it's already been cut in half. In 2014, they cut the allowable or recommended level in your drinking water in half. And they did so because after about 8 years since the National Research Council in 2006 told them that infants were being overexposed to fluoride in their bottle, formula fed, their formula reconstituted with tap water. The National Research Council showed these infants are getting too much of being overexposed. And we have obvious signs of it. And I'm going to get into that a little later. It took HHS, the proponents of fluoridation, Health and Human Services, CDC, 8 years to respond to that. 8 years. And when they did, they cut the allowable level in half to 0.7 because children had visible overexposure called dental fluorosis. We're going to get into that. But that's why the level is at 0.7 now. So a modern trend, before we get into the science, I just want to point out, the modern trend is ending fluoridation. The federal government is slow to act. As I said, it took them 8 years. The longer we wait for the EPA to act on the rest of the science showing harm, which I'll get to, the more children will be harmed. Communities like yours have the authority and the responsibility over fluoridation. This isn't up to the state or federal government. It's in the hands of your city council. So the buck stops there. There's no federal mandate. There's no state mandate in New York. The trend right now throughout the world is towards utilizing alternative, 21st century oral health solutions, such as school-based programs, locally and at the state level, as well as mid-level dental hygienists, and increasing Medicaid oral health reimbursements. The point is, the trend now in the world and the United States and North America is moving towards more individualized care, actually giving children access to care rather than a chemical in their drinking water. In the past decade, over 300 communities across the United States have ended the use of fluoridation chemicals. 300 in just the past decade. Recently, communities like Branson, Missouri, Brushy Creek, Texas. As you see there, I put up Brushy Creek. Their city council, after studying it for a year, said, hey, these are our 4 reasons. We had scientific concerns, extensive scientific studies raising questions about potential harm, personal choice. By putting in the water, you take that choice away. Everybody needs water. No one needs to be eating fluoride, ingesting it, right? So it should be a choice whether you consume or supplement with fluoride or use it topically. Shouldn't be a mandate. And it's not cost effective. 99% of the fluoride you put in your drinking water goes into every other source other than your mouth. Washing machines, gardening, and environmental considerations. But that's Brushy Creek, Childsburg, Alabama, Perry, Florida, Oneida, New York recently ended fluoridation, and State College, Pennsylvania, home of 75,000 people. And the reason I bring them up is because their entire water board was made up of scientific and engineering experts, many with PhDs from Penn State. And after a year of study, they concluded this almost same thing Brushy Creek did. This is harmful to citizens, is harmful particularly to infants, and we shouldn't be forcing citizens to do this. We also have seen legislators in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, Iowa, and Hawaii in just the past couple of years put in bills to prohibit fluoridation completely. The one that's gotten the furthest so far is New Hampshire, where it was passed out of committee, the House committee, almost unanimously. And that was a committee with doctors and physicians on it. So what are the chemicals that are being used? I mean, this is going to sound shocking. A lot of this sounds shocking, and you have to have an open mind, because unfortunately that's the world we live in. It is shocking, but this is accurate and you can look it up yourself. I had asked the folks on your committee if they could gather from your water department the material data sheet from that accompanies the batches of the fluorosilicic acid. And what that would tell you are the contaminants contained, the source of it, whether it came from China or whether it came from Mosaic in Florida, and it would also have a bunch of disclaimers on it that show, hey, the company selling you this product doesn't say it's safe. We're not going to stand by that. In fact, the company won't even suggest a use for this product that you bought because it's so hazardous. You would also find out it's classified as hazardous waste. The phosphate fertilizer industry is using your drinking water to remediate their toxic waste that they would otherwise have to pay to remediate. A good example is this: when Branson, Missouri just ended fluoridation, their water operators said it's more expensive for us to get rid of the remaining fluoridation chemicals than it is for us to go buy more. They were worrying, how do we get rid of the last of it now that we've stopped? And they were like, we should just keep dripping it, only because it's so hazardous, it would require a hazmat team and a hazard material fee to get rid of it, which is far more expensive than purchasing another batch of fluoridation chemicals. It's a hazardous waste that you're adding to drinking water voluntarily. Silica fluorides are derived primarily, and you're using fluorosilicic acid, so this is derived primarily from the pollution abatement scrubber systems installed on the exhaust pipes of the phosphate fertilizer manufacturing facilities. Essentially, fluoride gas is being released into the atmosphere. The EPA required the phosphate fertilizer industry, predominantly Mosaic in Florida, to put scrubber systems in their exhaust vents, and this is a mist. This captures the fluoride. This goes into a container, unrefined, unfiltered, and it's diluted 23% acid with the rest being water. And that is shipped to your drinking or your water treatment plant and dumped into your drinking water. It can't be dumped into a lake, can't be dripped into the ocean, can't be dripped into the lake, can't be dripped into the ground. just into your drinking water. Due to the lack of processing, these chemicals are known to contain elevated levels of certain contaminants, particularly aluminum, arsenic. In addition, recent research, including both epidemiological and laboratory investigations, have detected associations between the fluoridation of water and elevated lead exposure, particularly those living with houses with old pipes. And that's due to the extreme acidity of silicofluorides. They're incredibly corrosive. They're dangerous. If a water operator spills some on him, he could likely die from shock. In fact, a water operator recently died just a year ago from exposure to hydrofluorosilicic acid. Not in New York. I mean, I don't want to get you guys too worried. I think it was in Alabama. But what this chemical is so corrosive that it will leach heavy metals from the pipes and infrastructure. And moreover, due to that high corrosiveness, the caustic nature of the chemical, it requires the introduction of an additional treatment chemical. So, when you fluoridate, you have to add something extra that you didn't already have. So fluoridation really adds two chemicals. The other one is a corrosion inhibitor called orthophosphate. And I want to point out that in 2000, the National Sanitation Foundation, they're the ones who kind of just batch test every so often, every few years, certain batches of the chemical from the manufacturers. Not every batch that goes to your facility is tested for contaminants. It's just once every few years by NSF. But they released results of the test that showed that fluoridation chemicals can add as much as 1.6 parts per billion arsenic to the finished water. NSF found that about 40% of fluoridation chemicals tested were contaminated with detectable levels of arsenic. So you're adding additional contaminants and pollutants to drinking water with the chemical you're adding. Let's see. And I put a picture of the powder form that was on the right. You guys aren't using sodium fluoride. That's almost entirely now purchased from China, who has even lower safety and quality standards, and their products have been found to have been contaminated with unknown substances that state and federal governments have tested for and still have not determined what those substances are. So poor medical practice. Most developed nations, 95% of the world and 97% of Europe, do not fluoridate their drinking water. And it's predominantly because of the ethics involved. Silicofluorides are the only chemicals or water treatment process not intended to improve the safety or potability of drinking water. Unlike chlorine and coagulants that are added to purify and clarify the water, silicofluorides offer no such safety benefits. In fact, as I said, batch samples show that they actually contaminate the water, and the caustic acidity of the product will actually leach heavy metals from the infrastructure. And in contrast to other water treatment additives, fluoridation chemicals are added into the water supply with the intention of treating the residents consuming the water. In other words, it's the only thing you add to your water that treats you and not the drinking water. That sets a poor precedent. Fluoride is categorized as a drug by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, when employed for the prevention or mitigation of disease. That was the report from 2000. Thus, fluoridating water for the purpose of preventing tooth decay is a form of medical treatment. It's the only pharmacological agent being forced on the public at large, many of which are unaware of the addition of this chemical or informed of its side effects and potential risks. The practice contradicts the prevailing trends in modern medical care, which emphasize targeted therapies and personalized medicine that also stress the importance of informed consent. Again, they're using a prescription dose. And when I say that, I use this photograph here, right? Look on the back of your toothpaste bottle tonight when you brush your teeth. Again, I'm not against using fluoride toothpaste. We're here to talk about ingesting fluoride. It says, do not swallow, or if you swallow more than a pea-sized amount, call poison control. A pea-sized amount of your toothpaste is 0.25 milligrams, which is equivalent to also a serving of a fluoride supplement tablet, which is also equivalent to an 8-ounce glass of fluoridated drinking water. Now, one you can't swallow, the other two you can swallow, right? Now, the difference between the fluoride tablets provided by a dentist or a doctor in an office and the drinking water is that with fluoridation, the same concentration is delivered to the entire population, regardless of age, weight, health, or nutritional status, and does so without the individual oversight of a doctor or any control over the dosage administered. While water departments can generally control the concentration of fluoride being added to the water, they cannot control the amount dose an individual receives or protect them from overexposure because everyone drinks varying amounts of water. Some residents will drink substantially more water than others, particularly bottle-fed infants who have an impaired ability to excrete fluoride and receive up to 400% more fluoride per pound of body weight than adults consuming the same water. Now, I want to point out some common sense here, folks, before we really delve into the science. There is no shortage of topical fluoride products available to the public. You can go to any bodega, corner store, online, and you can find 6 months supply of toothpaste for a few bucks. We have so many topical forms of fluoride available to us. There's no shortage of it. There's no reason for us to taint our drinking water with it when you should be able to drink as much water as you need without having to worry about regulating your intake of a specific chemical, right? You should be able to drink freely and then apply fluoride topically at your choice. And here's the other point of that. The only way to get fluoride out of your drinking water, don't trust any of those advertisements you see about countertop filters. We've tested them. They are ineffective. The only way to get fluoride out of your drinking water is reverse osmosis or distillation. That's it. And those are expensive and require a lot of maintenance. So when we talk about this, we hear proponents say, what about the low-income folks? This is who we're really here for, those children who don't have access to toothpaste. I mean, I've never met a child that doesn't have access to toothpaste. It's on every corner. It's on the internet, right? So it's, let's also remember that, what about that single mother or the pregnant woman who doesn't want to expose her fetus to fluoride, or the pregnant mother who has to reconstitute infant formula with fluoridated tap water? What's she going to go buy a reverse osmosis system? I mean, we're forcing, this is really, it goes against water equity, right? We're forcing those people who cannot afford these systems to drink fluoride in their water, and they have no other choice, when you should be giving people freedom to drink water and a choice to consume cheap and topical or not consume it, but access cheap and topical fluoride. Now, why is this important? I mean, Stuart, the dentist will tell you that fluoride comes from lots of different sources and people are getting it primarily from swallowing the toothpaste. Wrong. According to the EPA, this is from the EPA, they do a relative source contribution analysis from 2010. The largest source of fluoride intake occurs from consuming fluoride in tap water and water-based beverages. These are beverages produced with fluoridated tap water. I mean, even if you don't live in a fluoridated community, you might drink that Coca-Cola that was bottled in a fluoridated community, right? In the graph below, or the graph you see here, the tap water is violet and water-based beverages are yellow. I know they're split by food, but notice that 70%, if you combine the two, or the violet and the yellow, notice that 70% of an infant's exposure comes from tap water. And that's generally from reconstituting infant formula. Again, about 60% of parents use formula rather than breast milk. So that's the vast majority. Also note that if you combine the violet and yellow for adults, above age 14, tap water and beverages make up to 80% of total fluoride exposures. That becomes important when you consider pregnant women living in fluoridated communities, and we're going to discuss that shortly. Okay, so obviously, if there's harm occurring, there must be clear and present evidence. We've been doing this for 80 years, right? I mean, I must have some evidence. Yeah, I do. So I'd love to talk in the third person here just for drama, but government data shows that tens of millions of U.S. residents have visible signs of overexposure to fluoride. The U.S. Center for Disease Control's National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, called NHANES, has constantly found skyrocketing dental fluorosis rates. The CDC reported that 41% of adolescents age 12 to 15 had dental fluorosis in 2014. You'll see I skipped the 10% and 23%, but it's showing it keeps going up as fluoridation keeps increasing. So 41% in 2004. That was what the NRC, when I talked about it earlier, the National Research Council in 2006 said children are being overexposed. And then it took till 2014 for the federal government to actually admit it and then say, we need to cut the levels in half. That was that number, 41%. It took them, that was what they were responding to, the overexposure. Well, guess what? That number has gone up. According to the CDC data, a 2012 survey found that rate jumped to 65% plus adolescents. And then that's not included on that graph, but according to a recent study, the most recent, Yang, June of 2021, published in the journal Ectotoxicology and Environmental Safety, they found the prevalence of dental fluorosis was 70% in US children. And in fact, as I sit here, a new study, Dong 2023, actually found that in one of the counties they looked at, it was as high as 87%. Now, what is dental fluorosis? You know, how's this? This is only caused by consuming fluoride. Dental fluorosis is a permanent tooth enamel defect caused by excessive fluoride intake during childhood, generally the age of 0 to 8 years of age, while your teeth are forming, your permanent teeth. It appears as white spots or lines in milder cases and pitted and staining enamel in more severe cases, weakening the teeth and resulting in increased decay. More importantly, you know, again, this is more importantly, it's a biomarker of overexposure to fluoride, right? If all of a sudden you saw your child's eyes turning yellow, you wouldn't just ignore it and say, "Yeah, that's aesthetic. That's aesthetic." You say it's like jaundice, or you say obviously there's some toxin that they're being exposed to. You wouldn't just say, "Oh, that's an aesthetic thing." And, you know, their confidence might be harmed, but who cares? They're not going to. That's what I say that because the ADA and dentists will say, "Oh, it just makes the teeth look a little weird, but there's no other additional harm." Well, no, it's a biomarker of overexposure. And if you think that you just harmed your teeth while the fluoride passed all your other organs, you have to be, that's ridiculous. And wait till you see the science I'm going to come up with in a minute. So I also want to point out that the NHANES data, that's the CDC's own data, this using the same data that they found with this overexposure, has also been used in recent published peer-reviewed studies to link fluoridated water with a number of additional side effects, including early onset of menstruation for Black teens. That study was actually out of Mount Sinai Hospital, I think in New York. Sleep disorders in adolescents, increased uric acid levels in blood that increases inflammation, and kidney and liver impairment in adolescents. I think a lot of these studies were actually were conducted by the team at Mount Sinai in New York. So let's get to why is that overexposure really important? So fetal exposure, there's no question that fluoride is neurotoxic. There's now a large body of government-funded research indicating that fluoride is harmful to the developing brain, is associated with lowered IQ in children, and a significant increase in ADHD diagnosis and related behaviors in children at doses experienced in fluoridated communities. As of July 2023, there are now 78 human studies that have reported an association between fluoride exposure and reduced IQ. Experts in toxicology have likened the size of the effect to that from lead. In fact, the level of evidence that fluoride is neurotoxic now far exceeds the evidence that was in place when lead was banned from gasoline. The difference is, instead of a corporate polluter, we have a government polluter. So it's a little harder to stop this train on the tracks. I do want to point out that 12 NIH, National Institutes of Health, US government-funded studies have looked at cognitive impairment and fluoride exposures, and all of them found harm. All 12 of 12. So, sometimes proponents say, well, we're not aware of any studies. Well, let's see, all 12 NIH-funded studies showed cognitive impairment, and most at levels in optimally fluoridated communities. So just, I know for time, I'm going to just kind of breeze through some of these. A Harvard meta-analysis in 2012, that was the first NIH study, found an average 7 IQ point loss in 26 out of 27 studies in their meta-analysis. Most in that study had higher fluoride concentrations than we find in the US, but many still had total exposures to fluoride that were similar to some people in fluoridated communities. But we get to the higher quality studies. I can't go back, but I don't need to. The highest quality fluoride brain studies have occurred since 2017. They're relatively new, most of them NIH funded. The first, Bashash 2017, found an association between fetal exposure to fluoride and lowered IQ in Mexico. It found that for every milligram per liter increase in fluoride in a pregnant woman's urine, about the same difference caused by ingesting fluoridated water. We'll talk about mother's urinary level here in a second. So that increase was linked to a reduction of the child's IQ by an average of 5 to 6 points. Laredo Tresande, MD, a leading physician affiliated or unaffiliated with the study, said it raises serious concerns about fluoride supplementation in water. 2 years after that, 2 more government-funded studies found similar results, linking fetal exposure to fluoridated water in Canada, optimally fluoridated Canada, to lowered IQ. One of them was in JAMA Pediatrics. That's the Journal of the American Medical Association. And it's actually, so far, it's one of their most viewed studies ever published. So when our proponents of fluoridation say they're not aware of any studies, it's pretty much, it literally is one of the most viewed studies in the leading medical pediatric journal in the world. So that they're not telling you the truth. This was published in Journal of JAMA. It found that for every 1 milligram increase in fluoride in pregnant women's urine was linked to a 4.5 decrease in IQ in their male children. JAMA Pediatrics physician editor, so the editor of the journal, said, quote, "I would not have my wife drink fluoridated water if she was pregnant." At last, and just this past year, the 12th, actually, I'm going to skip that because I don't want to take up too much of your time. I could go through every single study, but I did want to point out that famed Harvard researcher Philippe Grandjean, known for helping warn the world about the effects of arsenic, mercury, and PFOAs, said, given the ubiquity of fluoride exposure, the population impact of adverse effects from fluoride may be even greater than for other toxic elements like lead, mercury, and arsenic. So I did want to point out that a new study from Canada published just last year in the journal Nutrients found that pregnant women who had low iodine, so the impact is even worse if women have lower iodine, and elevated fluoride, had boys who suffered an average IQ loss that was 58% greater than the already significant IQ loss from elevated fluoride alone. That was Goodman 2022. It found that artificially fluoridated drinking water was the main source of the fluoride exposure. The boys of women, it predominantly gets boys. That's a lot of neurotoxins. They predominantly harm males more than females. So this is typical. But the boys of women with low iodine levels lost an average of 9.3 IQ points, while those mothers with adequate iodine but fluoridated water, their boys lost 6 IQ points for every milligram increase in a mother's urine fluoride concentration. To put that into perspective, according to published research, that's a higher IQ loss drop for that child than if the mother smoked 20 cigarettes a day for the entire pregnancy. So now we have those studies, but maybe we're talking about just some of the women and the ones that just have high levels. Wrong. Several studies have looked at actually maternal fluoride urinary levels in North America. First, before we get to those, I want to point out that the first benchmark dose analysis conducted on fluoride water and IQ was conducted by Philippe Grandjean recently and published in the journal Risk Analysis, and it confirms that extremely low fluoride exposure during pregnancy impairs fetal brain development, and at the population level may currently be causing more damage. Oh, we already said that, lead, mercury, and arsenic. The study found that a maternal urine fluoride concentration of just 0.2 milligrams per liter, which is exceeded 4 to 5 times in pregnant women living in fluoridated communities, was enough to lower IQ by 1 point. They stated that these findings provide additional evidence that fluoride is a developmental neurotoxicant, and the benchmark results should inspire revision of water fluoride recommendations aimed at protecting pregnant women and young children. While fluoridation promoters claim that IQ loss only occurs at fluoride concentrations at higher levels than 0.7, in reality, pregnant women's urine levels in fluoridated communities are about 4 to 5 times higher than this estimated benchmark dose of 0.2. You can see them here of the two studies. You can see that the women in the fluoridated communities had double the urinary fluoride levels as opposed to the non-fluoride women living in the pregnant women in the non-fluoridated communities. A third study looking at women in Los Angeles was just published. I'm talking like, I believe, a week ago, and it had the same finding. So we're 3 out of 3 that women in fluoridated communities are exposed to dramatically higher levels in their urine. So I did want to play a short video. This is Bruce Lamphere. And because you don't want to just hear from me, I'm not a medical expert. So I have a couple of videos here for medical experts. They're both only I'm going to skim through a little bit, but they're only 4 minutes long each. And I want you to hear from this Bruce Lamphere. He's a physician, a clinical researcher. He's the person who the EPA relied on in exposing that low levels of lead cause harm. Oh, uh-oh. Let's go back to him.
18 out of 19 high-quality studies reviewed by the
Okay, there we go.
18 out of 19 high-quality studies reviewed by the National Toxicology Program show that children exposed.
Yeah, I'm going to skip through just so maybe.
I wanted to start out with just a little background because I think it's relevant, and that is background of my own work on lead. I'm a physician certified in public health and preventive medicine. I completed my medical degree at the University of Missouri in Kansas City and my public health training at Tulane University in New Orleans. I live in Canada now, but 50 years ago, I went to Alice Landrigan Elementary School in Amarillo, Texas, and I spent my weekends climbing in Paladero Canyon. It was a very formative period of my life. For the past 25 years, I've conducted research on how lead and other toxic chemicals like pesticides and air pollution affect children's learning abilities and their risk for behavioral problems like ADHD and autism. I've served on science committees of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Centers for Disease Control, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. Most of my studies were on lead poisoning in children, and they were the key studies used by the EPA and the Department of Housing and Urban Development to set federal standards for lead in water and dust. They were also the key studies that led the EPA, the Centers for Disease Control, and the World Health Organization to conclude that no amount of lead is safe for children. 6 years ago, Christine Till, a scientist at York University in Toronto, Canada, asked if I would help her study fluoride in a Canadian birth cohort. This was a cohort that I helped to start with over 2,000 pregnant moms following the children out to now about 10 years of age. This particular cohort, this group of moms and children, is particularly important when we're thinking about fluoride because the cities that we studied, 10 cities across Canada, include fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities. I'd like to share the results of 3 of the studies that we've completed so far. In our first study, we found that the IQ scores of boys were 4 points lower if their mothers had higher amounts of fluoride in their urine during pregnancy. The amount of fluoride in urine is a good way to measure how much a person is exposed to fluoride, but it varies day to day. We also found that the IQ scores of boys and girls were 5 points lower when they were 4 years of age if their mothers had higher levels of fluoride in their drinking water during pregnancy. An op-ed in the Dallas Morning News said that this study was deeply flawed. That's not true. We used the same methods in the fluoride study that I used in my studies on lead poisoning. Our study on fluoride was more heavily scrutinized than any of the other 300 plus studies I've published in the past 25 years. In addition, the National Toxicology Program, which is a program of the United States National Institutes of Health, concluded that our study, our fluoride study, was a high quality study. In fact, our results are consistent with most other high quality studies. 18 out of 19 high quality studies reviewed by the National Toxicology Program show that children exposed to higher amounts of fluoride during early brain development had diminished IQ scores. Almost half of those studies had fluoride levels relevant to drinking water in fluoridated communities. That level of consistency across 18 of 19 studies is highly unusual in research and shouldn't be dismissed. In the second study, we found that women who drank tap water with higher levels of fluoride were at higher risk for hypothyroidism, a low functioning thyroid gland. That shouldn't be particularly surprising. In the past, fluoride was used to treat patients with hyperthyroidism, that is a hyperactive thyroid. Hypothyroidism in any woman is a problem, but it's especially problematic for pregnant women because the developing fetus is wholly dependent on their mother's thyroid hormones. They don't make their own thyroid until beginning in the second trimester. In the third study, we found that boys whose mothers had higher fluoride and lower iodine during pregnancy did even more poorly on IQ tests than boys whose mother had higher fluoride and normal iodine. Iodine, as all of you know, is a critical vitamin for thyroid hormone. Children who are born in communities with really low iodine are at risk for cretinism, a severe form of cognitive or intellectual deficit. So what can we conclude? Not all studies show that children who are exposed to higher levels of fluoride do more poorly on cognitive tests, but over 90% of high quality studies do show that fluoride results in IQ deficits in children. In the Dallas Morning News, the authors of an op-ed said that there isn't a credible other side to the fluoride question. I disagree. The NTP, the National Toxicology Program, concluded that levels of fluoride commonly found in pregnant women are harmful to their children. I applaud Dallas City Council for asking these tough questions. Questioning is a critical part of the scientific process, and the public, especially publicly elected officials, should be involved in science. These questions, like whether pregnant women and children should be exposed to fluoride, are simply too important to leave up to scientists and public health officials.
So that was Bruce Lamphere. I'm going to actually skip past this one just for a second and come back to it.
We lowered the recommended level. If you were going to do it,
actually, I'll just move. I might come back to this one. Do I have like 15 minutes more, or do you want me to shorten this up a bit? Yeah.
No, you totally. I mean, this is so important. I think
Okay.
if we're going to try to effect policy change, we need to have the information. So
Okay, great. Thank you.
go
I
at it.
appreciate everyone's patience. I only have a few more slides after this, but this video, you are among the first people seeing this. I want everybody to know this. This is Linda Birnbaum, PhD. Well, I'll let the video speak for
we
itself.
lowered it from one for the recommended level. If you were going to do it in drinking water, we lowered it from 1.2 ppm to 0.7 ppm. I think it needs to come way down below that, if we even need it at all.
So Linda Birnbaum is a certified toxicologist and microbiologist. She is the former director of the National Toxicology Program, 2009 to 2019, and the former director of NIEHS. That's from NIH. I mean, she's received incredible awards for her work, including the Surgeon General's Medallion and awards from the EPA and the National Academy of Sciences. and she's served on a number of toxicological boards as leadership.
On the first part of the question, which really has to do with the developmental neurotoxicity of fluoride. I am quite convinced by the burgeoning literature, and this is really based largely on the human data, that elevated fluorine is a problem for the development of babies' brains. I should say, the brain develops very early in utero, and then brain development continues through actually about age 25. But the real critical windows appear to be early in utero and early infantile. There is no good data today showing that fluoridation protects against cavities. That was the basis of the 1962 Public Health Advisory, in which the levels were set at 1.2 ppm inorganic fluoride being put in the water. But as more and more fluoride is present in our environment overall, I think everyone, just about everyone, uses fluoridated toothpaste, fluoridated mouthwash. A lot of especially black teas have high levels of fluoride in them, and so on. We get lots of fluoride from environmental sources that we don't really need it added to our drinking water anymore. I initiated a program when I was director of NTP to do a systematic review of fluoride neurotoxicity. Let's just say we've been waiting for those reviews to be actually published. Drafts were sent to the National Academies, which I had decided upon doing rather than our normal external peer review process because of the political nature of drinking water fluoridation. There's a very, very strong dental lobby that believes that fluoridation is protective against tooth decay. I will say there is no benefit of ingested fluorine. The benefits of fluorine to teeth are topical. So swishing as an adult, or even as not a very young child, but a child, is probably going to be fine. Remember, you swish and they tell you to spit it out, you don't swallow it, but there's no benefits to ingested fluorine. So I actually wrote an editorial, and my goodness, now it's a year and a half or 2 years ago, where I called for pregnant women not to drink fluoridated water. And of course, we all encourage that breast is best if women can to nurse their babies, because fluorine is not transmitted through breast milk to the babies. But if you're going to use formula for your baby, please don't use fluoridated water. I just checked with some of my former colleagues at NTP. This report has been scheduled to be released multiple times. Report repeatedly delayed. The person who was my associate director of NTP, who's now working as a volunteer to get this report out, feels that it will finally come out. We've had another release date of May 18th, which just passed, and he is hopeful that it will finally come out soon. But it has been a long, arduous process. I am not terribly familiar with the impacts that the fluoride might have on the kidney or its autoimmune effects. I know, at high concentrations, we know that fluoride can be associated with skeletal fluorosis. At slightly elevated concentrations, I was on a committee with the Public Health Service that in 2015, we lowered the recommended level. If you were going to do it in drinking water, we lowered it from 1.2 ppm to 0.7 ppm. I think it needs to come way down below that. if we even need it at all.
So again, that was pretty much one of the foremost toxicologists of our time, of our modern era. Spent 40 years, I believe, as a federal scientist and was an NTP director and NIEHS, that's a Department of National Institutes of Health, director as well for a decade. So, we're not talking about conspiracy theories here. This is science-based opposition, no matter what you hear from the proponents of fluoridation. So just to reiterate, the National Toxicology Program conducted a 7-year systematic review of fluoride's neurotoxicity. And they reported that of the 55 studies that they felt were high enough quality to be included, 52 found decreases in child IQ associated with increase in fluoride. That's a 95% consistency. So the weight of the science is showing that fluoride in water is harmful, not beneficial. That's the weight of the evidence. You don't get more weight than 95%. Of the 19 studies they rated the highest quality, 18 of the 19 found a lowering of IQ. The meta-analysis, the NTP meta-analysis could not detect a safe exposure level, including at levels commonly found in artificially fluoridated water. And in fact, because we're actually involved in a federal lawsuit with the EPA over the neurotoxicity of fluoridation chemicals, we were able to get the judge and through legal wrangling to make the NTP report public. Right now, it has yet to be published. It's been peer reviewed 8 times, I think, multiple times. And each time, it moves further, and each time they continue to conclude that it's a developmental neurotoxin. But unfortunately, Admiral Rachel Levine, Assistant Secretary at HHS, communicated to the director of NTP that she doesn't want it published, at least until she reviews it or approves it herself. So that's where we are. It hasn't yet to be published, but because of our court case, we were able to get the final form made public, and as well as notes and communications between the authors of NTP and the peer reviewers. And it's interesting because one peer reviewer said, well, does this apply to water fluoridation? And the NTP authors said very clearly, yes, this absolutely applies. The harm does apply to pregnant women living in fluoridated communities. So that's where we are now. It has yet to be published, but it's been peer reviewed, and the Scientific Advisory Board of the National Toxicology Program determined that the NTP authors adequately responded to all the peer review comments. And so while proponents will say, well, it was peer reviewed and it's not published because they didn't meet the standards by the peer reviewers. Nope. The Scientific Advisory Board of the NTP unanimously said, yep, let's go forward with publishing it. And you adequately responded to the peer reviewers. So hopefully this will be published any day, I'm hoping. But we're waiting for Admiral Rachel Levine. Infant exposure. So we're not just talking about fetuses. I'm going to go a little faster here because Bruce Lanphier and Linda Birnbaum already kind of mentioned this. But an infant who's getting reconstituted infant formula with tap water will receive up to 400 times more fluoride than an adult consuming the same level of water, right? And why that's important is because infants can only excrete about 15% of the fluoride that they ingest, as opposed to an adult. And you might even be concerned, well, I only excrete 50%. What happens to the rest of it? Well, it's a bioaccumulative toxin. You accumulate it over a lifetime in your bones primarily, and other calcifying tissues. That's something else people don't generally realize. Breast milk, naturally, a mother's breast will filter out toxins, and fluoride is among them. So a breastfed infant will receive, or pardon me, a bottle-fed infant will receive approximately up to 150 times more fluoride than a breastfed infant. Now, this, fluoridation should stop with this document right here. I don't know how the proponents of fluoridation even get past this, but in a clinical setting, if you look at fluoride supplementation in a vacuum, meaning when you go into a dentist's office or a pediatrician's office, they ask, do you live in a fluoridated community? And you say, no, my water has no fluoride in it. Then they'll say, well, I might give you a fluoride supplement, right? If they're not up to the science, if they haven't read the science. And even under their own clinical guidelines, look at birth to 6 months. This is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. They're the ones who set the guidelines. 0 fluoride. 0 fluoride. So an infant in a reconstituting infant formula in a fluoridated community is getting way more fluoride than even a dentist or pediatrician would ever prescribe to a patient. It goes beyond their guidelines, and no one ever wants to talk about this. Even their own guidelines contradict water fluoridation. Now, one of those NIH-funded studies that was looked at actually bottle-fed infants. And it was published in the Journal of Environment International, and it underscores our concerns. The study suggested that infants fed formula prepared with fluoridated water exhibited average IQ scores 6 points lower than those mixed with non-fluoridated water. Notably, the losses in nonverbal IQ were even more substantial, averaging 13 points lower. And Riddell 2019, published in Environment International, found a shocking 284% increase in the prevalence of ADHD among children in fluoridated communities in fluoridated Canada compared to non-fluoridated ones. Studies finding similar results were published in 2018 and 2015 as well. So not only is a pregnant mother exposing the fetus harming the child's brain, but then that child who's already harmed will then maybe get bottle fed and continue to be harmed. So what I hear generally from proponents, dentists and doctors who don't know the science, they just read talking points. But the CDC says it's safe. Well, I said we're involved in a federal lawsuit, and we deposed the CDC's oral health director, Casey Hannon, who in this deposition is speaking on behalf of the CDC. He is the CDC incarnate in his presentation. He prepared many, many dozens of hours for this to be the CDC's representative. Let's hear what he says. This is our lawyer.
The CDC was very helpful for our case. It's correct to say that CDC does not have any data on the tolerable upper fluoride intake for neurotoxic effects for infants.
Yes.
Okay. And you see how the definition also includes toddlers.
Mm-hmm.
So CDC does not have any data on the tolerable upper fluoride intake for neurotoxic effects on toddlers.
That's true.
Okay. And CDC, as you sit here today, is not aware of any data in the published literature that would define the tolerable upper fluoride intake for neurotoxic effects on children.
As a rep of CDC, to my knowledge, we don't have any knowledge about that.
Okay. They admitted that they don't have any safety data on fluoridation and the brain, fluoridation and IQ, fluoridation.
So if you go to their website, they'll say it's safe and effective. You will not find any information on neurotoxicity or the 12 NIH-funded studies or the 78 human brain studies or the NTP report. They just continue as a propaganda agent, really, to promote fluoridation. But under oath, where they're not allowed to lie, they admit they have no safety data. How does that make all of you feel? Okay, so let's see. I think I skipped. Maybe did I get down to efficacy already? Let's see. So this is the last bit. I'm going to cover efficacy last, really. That's whether it's effective for dental decay. When fluoridation first began in the 1940s, dentists believed that fluoride's main benefit to teeth came from the swallowing during childhood. However, the CDC in 1999 and 2001 acknowledged that fluoride's benefits are derived mainly from its topical use, as you heard from Linda Birnbaum, and not from ingestion. The most recent relevant study found no significant correlation between ingested fluoride and cavity reduction, further validating a 2009 study that stated, quote, achieving a caries-free status may have relatively little to do with fluoride intake, recommending an optimal fluoride intake is problematic. In other words, the available evidence suggests that there is insufficient justification for the widespread consumption of fluoridated water for the purpose of protecting one's teeth. This is especially pertinent when considering that the benefit of fluoride relates to its topical application, while the most significant concerns center around systemic effects, ingesting it. All the risk comes from ingesting it with zero benefit. Considering this, it appears more reasonable to administer fluoride directly to the teeth through toothpaste, as opposed to mandating its ingestion through the water supply. This approach would more align closely with the principle of targeted and informed dental care, while minimizing the potential risk associated with systemic exposure. Despite the long, and I want to point out here, the reason I brought this up is because the CDC's newest data, the states with the lowest childhood dental decay, third grade, that's dental decay, my state is actually the first with the lowest dental decay. It's New Hampshire. We have among one of the lowest fluoridation rates. We're rated, I think, 41 out of 50 states for fluoridation. We don't have much of it, and yet our children have the lowest dental decay in the country. That's followed by Vermont, which has I think they're like 39 out of 50 states for fluoridation. They're among the bottom. And the decay rate is the second lowest decay rate in the country. Now compare that to 3 of the most fluoridated communities, states, or, Washington, D.C. is a district, and then the 2 states with the most fluoridated. They have state mandates there where they mandate every community fluoridates. Look at the decay rate. It's double. And the mandates have existed since the 70s. Right? I mean, what do we get there? So I do want to point out also, well, let's get to systemic versus topical. This is another 1-minute video. Here is Casey Hannon again talking about.
Returning back to the document, page 937, CDC continues. However, laboratory and epidemiologic research suggests that fluoride prevents dental caries predominantly after eruption of the tooth into the mouth, and its actions primarily are topical for both adults and children. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
So CDC recognizes and accepts that fluoride's predominant mechanism for preventing tooth decay comes from fluoride's topical contact with the outside of the enamel, correct?
Predominantly, that's where the benefits are, yes.
Okay.
There are some benefit to systemic exposure.
So what studies does CDC base the statement that fluoride also has a systemic effect?
Uh-oh.
At this point, I'm not able to point to the exact studies that forms the basis of that position.
Okay. Can you provide me any explanation as to the basis for CDC statement on this?
Any explanation?
Yeah. Any reference to any information, anything that I could go to assess the foundation for CDC's position on this?
At this point, I wouldn't be able to provide that to you.
Okay.
Okay, so again, just 2 different videos confirm that what you read on the CDC's website and what the proponents of fluoridation, when they read their talking points, they're not based in science. It's just talking points promoting fluoridation. Under oath, you realize that they have no safety data and that there's no benefit systemically. I do want to give you something really specific here to New York. We just put this together. This is based off the New York State's Public Health Department's data from 2001. And you see what this is showing you is that the blue shows counties that are fluoridated versus not fluoridated. Fluoridated counties are the ones way to the right. There are lots of blue, lots of fluoridation. And dental decay or caries experience for 3rd graders is that red line in the middle. You'll notice that it's not like the red line just does a 45-degree angle down, does it? It shows that fluoridation has absolutely no impact, no correlation whatsoever with dental decay in children. You are the primary targets of it in your own state, according to your own state's public health department and their data. Now, it's also worth noting before I get to this one that despite fluoridation having been going on for 80 years now, there has never been a randomized trial on the efficacy of water fluoridation. That sounds crazy, but randomized trials, RCTs, are the standard method assessing safety and efficacy of any medical intervention. And one has never been done on safety or efficacy of fluoridation ever. And this is my last slide, so we can move on to questions if people have any. But this is the World Health Organization's data to the left. And what you'll notice that non-fluoridating countries, remember 95% of the world does not fluoridate, as well as 98%, 97% of Europe. Non-fluoridating countries have experienced the same level of decline in dental decay as fluoridating countries between 1970 and 2000. And the data actually goes to 2017. You can see that one little. This fact, which is widely acknowledged in the dental literature, can be quickly demonstrated by examining the World Health Organization's tooth decay data trends for each country. And the following figure compares the tooth decay trends in Western countries with and without water fluoridation. Most Western industrialized countries not only have rejected water fluoridation, but also have experienced the same decline in childhood decay as seen in countries that fluoridate their water. So, I'll leave it at that. I urge people to, support alternative methods, and definitely there are other studies showing harm. I'm not going to get into them tonight, but please visit our website. There are studies showing increases hypothyroidism, liver and kidney impairment, bone fractures in children and in the elderly, hip fractures. And these are in fluoridated communities. And a lot of these studies are using either CDC data or government funding. So I'm available for any questions that people have.
Oh my God, probably have a million questions, but I can't ask them all. So I have a comment and then I'm going to open it up to questions from other people and then I might add a question. But I just posted in the chat a document that's on the GOV site of Austin, Texas. And they already removed fluoride from their water, but they also mentioned that fluoride was used as a rat poison back in the 30s. So if you're putting, and it's in the chat if you want to look at it, and it's on a governmental site, so that's that's something in itself. But if they were using fluoride to kill rats, what do you think it's doing to us? I'm just gonna make that statement, but I'm going to open it up to questions. Dan, I think Daniel Aliberti had a question. I'm trying to get back on here. Let's see. Dan, I think you're still muted.
He can unmute himself. He has to press it because he's on the phone.
Great. All right, go ahead.
And you can speak. You're unmuted. Speak up a little louder, so Antonella.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very
sir.
good. Okay. Yeah, I had a two-part question. One is, do you have any information on bone health and joint replacement vis-a-vis the fluoride? And you talked about dental decay. Do you have any information on apparently healthy teeth being forced out by the density of the jawbone because of the fluoride?
Well, the first question was about bone health and study. There was originally this belief that that if you consume fluoride, it could actually strengthen bones, particularly for women with osteoporosis and stuff. And they've actually found that wasn't the case whatsoever. So it's not beneficial. And in fact, because your bones accumulate most of your fluoride that you ingest over your lifetime, there are now studies showing harm. In fact, in October, a study, Lindsay et al., 2023, published, let's see, the article titled Community Water Fluoridation Rates of Pediatric Fractures, found that children living in fluoridated communities, that's at 0.7, had forearm fractures at 2.5 times the rate of children living in non-fluoridated communities. That was using CDC data, and that's a brand new peer-reviewed study. There was also a study a couple of years ago. Here we go, hip fractures. And this one was in England by Public Health England. And or I should say, let's see. I want to make sure I give you the right data here. But what it found was that water fluoridation, here we go. Association between fluoridation and hip fractures. Fluoridation increased, finding a 7% higher rate, 20%. So a 7 to 20% higher rate of hip fractures in fluoridated communities for the elderly. And that was using Public Health England data. So those are two recent studies on bone health. I think that's still a burgeoning area of science on this issue. But it's not shown. We know there's no benefit, and now we believe that there's definitely evidence of harm. As opposed to the jawbone, I'm not familiar with that science. I do know that I have heard the theory that children who consume fluoridated water for one reason or another, their teeth will actually their teeth will erupt. Their primary teeth will erupt later out of their gums, which is believed to actually have caused some of those early studies to have shown a slight decrease in dental decay for young children, as opposed to non-fluoridated children, because the belief was that delay in eruption just led to the teeth not being exposed to acids and bacteria as early as the children in the non-fluoridated community. But I don't think that the science is strong there, and I really don't have much on the jawbone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for the question. Does anyone else on the call have questions? And then I want to see if Robert at DVP wants to offer up any comments. Let me see if I see anyone else. Dominic.
Hey, hi, thanks. So Stuart, I've been listening to the entire presentation, and Antonella, and thank you very much. It's very interesting and very eye-opening and not very surprising. I guess a few of my notes here, just in the absence of other questions, is I would be curious to know when and why this was, initially initiated by the governments or the water bodies or the municipalities, and I guess secondly, can you tell us about the interests that disagree with you, and why, and not in a like there must be a reason why this was started, right? So it was probably started because some study that you're finding is debatable or probably narrow. That's basically, so that's a question about the history of when it started, and then who and why are the present opposers of your group's interest in eliminating fluoride from the water? And thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'll start out. I mean, I want to point out to people, I don't think, and not that you were saying this at all, but if there are folks out there who do believe that maybe there were like nefarious purposes or intent, and I want to point out that none of us that I'm aware of believe that there was nefarious intent. I think the intent was from day one to provide fluoride and dental care to children. And I guess if you go, there's a long history, but if you go all the way back, it goes back to there were folks in Colorado. There are some areas, as I said, there's just it's rare, but there are areas that have naturally high well water levels of fluoride. And one area was in the Rockies in Colorado, and a dentist noticed that some folks had brown stains all over their teeth. It was dental fluorosis. And he felt that some of those folks had lower dental decay rates. I don't think there was ever an official study that occurred, right? But he said some of these folks have better or lower decay than the people that don't have brown teeth. And so I want to look into it. And what he determined was that some of these communities had higher levels of fluoride, naturally occurring calcium fluoride in their water than others. I point out the word calcium because your teeth, benefit from calcium too. Although calcium fluoride is not good for you, but that could have been beneficial to those people with the brown stain. Also, the theory back then is the people with the brown stains were oftentimes trying to get rid of them. So toothbrushing didn't really exist at that time. So people would actually use these different, laths or whatever you want to call them, these chemicals, and they would brush their teeth to try to get the brown staining off. And so that could have also been the result, caused the slight reduction in decay that this dentist showed. But that didn't initially, that started the discussion of whether or not fluoride has a beneficial effect for dental decay. And then over the years after that, there were a lot of polluting industries, aluminum, Alcoa, aluminum smelting, primarily, and other industries, manufacturing industries that were exposing their workers to high levels of fluoride. And they were exposing the population around their factories to high levels of fluoride. And these companies controlled really a lot of the money and were able to provide grants for a lot of studies, trying to pretty much claim that fluoridation was safe because they didn't want to face liability for exposing their employees who had high levels of exposure. They didn't want to face liability. So they funded a lot of studies that showed that maybe there was a benefit even to it. But over time, more and more studies, I guess, were I think Grand Rapids, Michigan was the first community to implement fluoridation in the 40s. This was at a time when, DDT was used and all sorts of, people, ghosts, as long as you were smoking menthol lights, you were doing all right, according to your doctor in the 1940s, right? Or cigarettes. So filtered cigarettes. So it's, times have changed since then. And what I can tell you is that during this time in the 50s, when the Public Health Association proclaimed fluoridation as safe, they hadn't conducted any safety studies. And from that moment on, it became a lobbying effort where industry collaborated with government and they worked together to expand this program. Now, was there potentially a benefit, to that topical exposure at a time when toothbrushing wasn't prevalent in the United States, at a time when you couldn't get mouthwash and it was hard to find a dentist? And possibly, sure, but a lot has changed in 80 years, right? Or 70 years. A lot has changed. Now you can get topical fluoride products. Now nutrition is much better. Now you can access a dentist. And so now people are overexposed, and now studies are being conducted. As I said, in 2017, I believe that was the first ever study looking at fetal exposure at lower levels.
Just out of respect for the time, I think you've definitely answered my question. I appreciate it.
And so who supports this? So
wait, one second. I'm sorry, 1 second. Florence, can you let Katie back in? She's in the waiting room. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so who's pushing this? So the primary proponents is the American Dental Association. The primary funder outside of the American Dental Association is Delta Dental Insurance. The other organization pumping this is your tax dollars, which HHS directs the CDC, which then they distribute to state and local dental groups to lobby, and to PR agencies to lobby in favor of this. So it's the ADA, the CDC, and Delta Dental who are the primary proponents of fluoridation right now.
Thank you.
That's really interesting. Okay. I think, sorry, Shahanaz.
Hi,
Sorry.
everyone. It's okay. I have like three questions. First one, regarding if you boil the water, is make any change? The second one, if you use a filter for your water, is also make a change? The last one is, do you have a certain test you can do it to check your water and see if the water is like bad or something? Thank you.
Thanks, Shahanaz.
So as far as filtering the water out, the only way to filter the water out is with reverse osmosis or distillation. That's it. There are some countertop filters that are sold that claim to reduce it by 90%. We've tested those and they very, very quickly degrade and do not reduce the fluoride. I mean, to some extent they do, but you're definitely not getting 95 or 80 or 70 or 60, or you're maybe getting 40% reduction in some of these countertop ones. And when I say countertop ones, I'm saying the ones specifically that say they remove fluoride. Colligan and Brita, the active charcoal ones, do not remove fluoride. Boiling your water will not remove fluoride. It'll concentrate the fluoride in that, since you reduce the amount of water and it does nothing to get rid of the fluoride, you're just concentrating the fluoride even further and making it worse. And your third question, what was that third question? Where you can get, I did want to point out, oh yes, how do you know? And I would also say spring water. You want to contact the companies. Spring water oftentimes has, because it's naturally occurring, has low levels of fluoride. So you have to contact the companies and ask them. They'll tell you what the fluoride levels are. As far as testing, yes, you can go online and you can find little testers. They're about 80 to $100, and you can test your water. But otherwise, what you do is you type in, if you live in New York City or you live in a borough or something, you type in the name of the community and then the following words: water quality report. And your water treatment plant is required by law to put out an annual water quality report. And in that report, it'll tell you that the levels of fluoride in your drinking water. And if you're living in New York City, it's probably 0.7 to 0.8. And it probably fluctuates even up to 0.1 or 1 part per million, pardon me, depending on water usage for that day.
All right, thank you so much. Robert, do you have, from DEP, do you have any comments that you can offer up? And what are your thoughts?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about the shadowing, being in an apartment. I came on to see what was being presented. I feel like a lot of information was given. If Florence has a copy of this presentation to share with me, that'd be much appreciative. But really, I came here just to see what would be said, and a lot of information was given. And like I said, I'd like to see that presentation as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I guess my question, first of all, does anyone else have any questions? Let me just check. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of information. I mean, it's kind of scary that all these years we've been ingesting fluoride, not knowing, and without informed consent. That's the whole thing. That's the whole problem. So I think at this point, what do you suggest? Like, what have other communities done? I know you said that we need to talk to our council people, but what have other communities done after they've received this information to try to kind of effect change in their communities? And what resistance have they been met after providing government officials with this data?
Yeah, the next step would be to take this information or take your concerns to your city councilors. They're the ones who ultimately will decide this. And what I would suggest is talk to them as a constituent, talk as a constituent to your representative behind the scenes or via phone, or try to get a meeting. And really, you have to educate them first, because again, you've all listened to this. It sounds like a lot of people came here with an open mind, but even so, it's pretty shocking, right? It almost sounds too unbelievable. If I didn't show you the NTP director and I didn't show you some of the studies and the graphs, you might not believe it. But this is actually happening, and so you have to give them that same amount of time to kind of absorb the material, look at the data. Also, look around in your community. Look at people's teeth when you're talking to them. If you see brown or white streaks, it's dental fluorosis. And maybe if few of those folks with dental fluorosis go and speak to the council and say, hey, I'm one of those people. I've been overexposed. I've been harmed. I've lived here my life. I grew up here. I've been harmed by fluoridation. I am a victim, someone that you harmed with your policy decisions or your predecessor did. That has a lot more impact. And if you start looking, you're going to start seeing, I can tell you.
Right.
So especially in the younger generation, millennials and, Generation X and younger. And so that's what we need. They need to hear from you guys first. And the reason I say that, it's not to be tricky. It's not to do stuff behind the scenes and get it out of the public eye. We want the public supports us. We want the public to know about this, because generally the public opposes putting pollutants in the drinking water. However, as soon as the ADA will respond to this, and I'm sure the representative of the state, as good of a person he probably is, my presentation and this recording will immediately go to the proponents of fluoridation so that they can provide their talking point responses point by point. And they're gonna, good luck with that, with the deposition videos. But that's what happens. As soon as they hear that you're talking to the city council, they have the money, they have the power. What they do is they come in and say, no studies exist showing harm. Trust us. We're the ADA. Why would we lie? We're the ADA. We're the CDC. Trust us that no studies exist. And that's what they do. They lie. And then they use their credibility, and that's why, back to that other person's response, that's why the proponents are still supporting this, because they have 75 years of their credibility on the line. When the NTP came out, when the NTP came out and said this is developmental neurotoxin at a press release, a member of the dental health community got up and said, okay, I don't disagree with your findings, but if we tell the public this, they'll be scared and they won't trust us and they won't trust the drinking water. So we should take the warnings out of your report. And so that's their thought process. Their credibility is on the line now. And so they're doubling down. And so if they know you're going to go to city council, they'll pound them with campaign contributions. They'll pound them with letters to the editor. They'll pound them with the letters, articles, op-eds, calling them conspiracy theorists, right-wingers, anti-vaxxers, things that have nothing to do with the debate, because they just try to ridicule and stifle debate. That's what will happen. But you can still, you guys had,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, you guys had a really good counselor for a while about balloon.
Balloon, yeah.
Yeah, and he understood the science. He looked into it.
But it's a huge implication, though, if you think about it. The city has been allowing a toxic chemical over 70 years, essentially contributing to the poisoning of people. It's not something that's going to be easily acknowledged. But I think the point is, let's do the right thing now by the community. I mean, for the people, for the young kids, for the pets. If you're a pet owner, we have to start doing the right thing for the people and just move forward, and hopefully, if there are things that can remediate some of the accumulation of the toxins in the body, then hopefully we can provide people with resources. But I think that's the path forward. I am so appreciative of your time. I'm so glad that you joined us. This is Florence. This was recorded, correct?
All our meetings are on YouTube.
Okay, beautiful, because what we could do is actually send, if you're okay with it, well, I mean.
It doesn't
it's
work that way. We
on
have to get clearance from the chair first.
Well, it's on YouTube, so, right? It's so we can.
Anybody can go and see it.
Yeah, so
We
we
don't
can,
send it out
we can't send it out to our council.
without
people so that-
clearance. No, we have to get clearance from the chair of the board first.
Oh, okay, well, we'll do that. All right. Does anyone, before we formally thank Stuart for joining us, anyone else? Oh, I had one last question. Katie is part of a water protection nonprofit group. And I just wanted to ask you, how is it affecting the wildlife, water for wildlife? Does it get excreted into the river waters or the waters where we have water life?
Yeah, sure. The science, I'll tell you, isn't incredibly strong on its impact on the ecosystem. I wish there was more science. I mean, it shows you after 80 years, there's been very little science or research conducted on fluoride in the drinking water. What has been conducted has shown that it does harm salmon, and it does harm I guess the gestation of frogs and other reptiles in the drinking water. And we know that it kills, people have shown that studies have shown that if you water your plants or even your house plants with fluoridated water, it can actually shorten their lifespan as well. So, but unfortunately, I don't have a lot of strong evidence to share with you on that research. It's primarily just looking at the human effects.
That's awesome. And can you share
I will add one thing real quickly, though. Sorry, now that I remembered it.
Totally fine.
So over the course of fluoridation, as I said, it's a very caustic, corrosive chemical that they use. And every year, in about a dozen different communities, that chemical will erode through the safety container and the equipment around it, the different berms they use to contain the acid. And there have been a lot of examples, many dozens of examples in recent years of hydrofluorosilicic acid eating the concrete away in the flora of the water plants, and not necessarily in New York, but around the United States, and then entering the drinking water and entering river and river water. And in those scenarios, there have absolutely been reports of dead fish and dead wildlife.
Wow.
In those bodies of water. Yep. So that's in case of spills and accidents.
All right, that's really good information. And what's your website if anyone wants to take a look at your website for all the studies and all the wonderful information? I saw all the list of all the municipalities that have actually gotten rid of fluoride in the US, which was very impressive. So I hope people take a look at that.
Yeah, and the number on our homepage is a little, we're actually updating our website at the moment so that we can't actually change things on the homepage at the moment, but we're over 300 communities and not 294. But yeah, it's Fluoride Alert. That's FLUORIDE alert, ALERTE or ALERT.org. So fluoridealert.org is our website. And if you just Google, we used to be on the top of all Google searches, and our YouTube videos have hundreds of thousands of views and used to be on YouTube searches. But a few years ago, Google and YouTube censored us. Now good luck finding, unless you search specifically for www.fluoridealert.org, you're not going to find our materials readily on Google. And on YouTube, you have to essentially look up fluoride alert or fluoride action in our videos. That's just the way a lot of the new social media platforms, they have algorithms now that favor health authorities. We didn't do anything wrong. We've never had a video taken down once, ever, but we're censored. We're we're shadow banned very clearly.
That's why we should use DuckDuckGo or startpage.com. I think I found you there. All right. Well, thank you so much. The committee members, if you can, oh wait, it says someone said don't
Yeah.
go to .com.
Yeah, that's a trick the ADA played. You have to go to info or fluoridealert.org. If you go to fluoridealert.com, you go to the American Dental Association's fluoridation page.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
fine. All right.
Well-
Thank you, Brenda.
So ORG, we're a nonprofit, we're a charitable nonprofit, 501c3.
So definitely ORG. All right, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Stuart. I hope we can continue the conversation offline. We'll keep you posted. Yeah, I'll let you go, and the committee members, if you can stay online, because I need to take attendance, and we have to like motion to end the meeting and that wonderful stuff. But thank you
Well,
so
thank you.
much. All right, take it easy, Stuart. Thanks again. All right. So I guess we need to take attendance. Is there any old business or anything that anyone wants to bring up while we're at it? And if I can ask also your thoughts on what you thought about this presentation, that would be very helpful if you have some quick comments. Oh, is everyone gone already?
I have a question.
Oh, yeah. Sure, go ahead.
How does this presentation fit into our job description, so to speak, as community boards or community board members? I mean, I'm very anti-fluoride, and I've been talking about it for quite a few years. So I don't have a problem with that, but I do. I don't follow how it fits into our job description as a community board member or a community board.
Well, it's in our drinking water as community members. If it's something that's affecting our community, then we need to address it, because as Stuart mentioned, it's the council people that actually have weigh in as to whether we continue to have this toxic substance in our water, in our drinking water, where we have no choice but to consume it unless you have lots of money to buy bottled water. That's as a community member on the board, I think that's our duty to actually.
Antonella, as a community board, we're here to discuss, debate, and decide on items that the City of New York puts before us. This is an information session that the chair allowed. What he's asking is directly based to what the community board can discuss, debate, decide, and vote. This is an information session that chair allowed. Another chair may or may not allow this type of a discussion. These kinds of discussions normally happen at civic groups, just so you know. Being very formal, I'm not changing what you're doing, but what his question was very specific to the job task of the community board. The job task of the community board is being an advisory board to the City of New York. This is not a City of New York topic that was for the board for an advisory role.
Yes, but if there are things that are brought to our attention by the community, are you saying we should not address it?
Those are constituent complaints that would come into the board office. They would not go through board members. You, the board members, are a vehicle for the City of New York. You're appointed by the New York City Council. You, on your private life, would bring it to the council. Absolutely, no doubt. That would go through a civic group, not the community board. This chair allows.
If the guy mentioned if you're poisoned by the fluoride or you have the darkened teeth, and I came to the community board office and said, look, the stuff that's going in the water, I'm complaining. The stuff that's going in the water is affecting my health. What are you going to do about it? What would I be told?
You would be sent directly to Tiffany Caban's office. You would be sent directly to Julie Wan's office, because the council people are the ones who can remove it from the water. The community board cannot remove it. We're not legislation. We don't make law.
I know that.
We can make a recommendation.
But how would it be handled? Because there's a lot of people on this call, or the thing there, and so people are going to come and say, hey, community board, I saw this thing you had on Zoom, on YouTube, and I have a problem here. What do I do? they're
The
going to come
truth-
in and
the
they're
whole
going to ask these
truth and
questions.
the whole truth and nothing but the truth is if somebody called my office with this complaint, it would be directed to legislature. Legislature is Tiffany's office. It is Julie's office. Because it is something like this, that's where they would go. There are certain things that come to the office on the daily basis that are state related. We have nothing to do with the passport service. We have nothing to do with people who get stuck where they don't receive their social security check. Those go to the agencies of the city, state, and federal government where they're supposed
okay,
to.
I understand that, but I'm asking specifically about this presentation may trigger people calling the community board office or other community board offices, and
It would be
need to be told
directed.
how they would. How it's,
100%.
I think we're gonna have
They
to.
would be directed because it's city water. They would be directed to the council person's office. It's not state, it's city. So
No,
they
no.
would go.
they're not going to be sent to the water department or anything like that.
No, sir, never. This would never go to
Respectfully,
DEP.
Respectfully, Florence, I think as community members, and we're all individuals on the board, we're on the environmental committee. I think if these are issues that we're concerned about, and I'm happy to talk to Marie about this, but it's,
Sure.
we can't stick our head in the sand and know that there's something that's being put in our water and not do anything about it. Collectively, I
Absolutely.
think we have more power. If everyone feels the same, that's fine. If there are people who are totally against it, they want to continue drinking, tap water with fluoridation, that's fine too. But if people are concerned about it, then we really need to speak up.
Sure, that's why
Maybe
Marie
you have a
allowed this meeting to occur. But what Dan asked was very specific to the actions of the board and what the actions of the board would be underneath this. I can't tell you that the actions of the office wouldn't be exactly what they would be.
Okay.
I have people who would call, and if they did call after this presentation, they would be deferred to write letters to Julie Wan or to Tiffany Caban stating, I saw this and I am concerned, and what can I do? They would have to write letters to their council people. We have no action on this topic to remedy. We can't tell Robert to remove the water, and Robert does not
No,
have the power.
I'm
So,
not
no, I'm just
suggesting
being-
that.
I'm being realistic.
It sounds like Stuart suggested that other communities have reached out to their council members, and as a community board, if we agree, I think it would be nice to notify our council people that, and send them the presentation. Of course, we have to ask Marie, and I'm
We have
happy
to,
to do
Marie, of
that.
course.
And,
Yeah.
I think it's
So-
important that they know what's going on, and they know, because you know what? They can't plead ignorance. If people are getting injured and little kids are, suffering as a result of it, then, it's their duty as a representative to keep the public safe. And if we're
Mhm.
not helping in that process as community board members, I think we're failing.
So if a person comes before the community board, say, next Tuesday night, if I were a community member, which I am, so I come in and I say, I heard about this thing, our community board will say that, we're going to pursue it, or we're going to write a letter, or we're going to do something about it. We're not going to tell the public that we're doing nothing about it.
What would happen?
That's what I would like. I don't want to be in the position of the public coming to us as a community board and us telling them, well, we're not going to do anything about it.
Because the city hasn't brought
So
it to
can
us.
Dominic, please, depending on what the chair of the board says, because the chair of the board is the head of the agency, the chair makes the final decision. However, the right thing to do would be between now and the board meeting, if anybody says anything, tell them the truth. Please contact your elected officials. They have the power to change legislation. They're the ones. Let the elected officials hear your voice. This is why we vote for the people we vote for. So they do the bidding of the people. You, the people, have a strong voice. You have to tell Tiffany, you have to tell Julie, please, this is something that's important to us. Please, this is something that's important to our children. please. This is something that's important to our pets.
Okay.
This is
Well,
what
this-
we
this-
as historians.
There are a lot of issues,
Me-
Florence, there are a lot of issues
Okay.
that have come before the board that we don't specifically do anything about. However, we write letters to a lot of places, to a lot of government agencies. We wrote letters about the cell phone towers. We don't have control over it, but we did write a letter about it, didn't we?
Yes.
So.
Well, that will come up at
it's another.
under committee report. That will come up.
Okay,
Antonella
so
will
this is another, toxin, attacking our bodies, and, that we have no control over until we do have some control over it. It's been going on for 75 years.
Sure. So at the committee level, you'll bring that up. Antonella can call for a request. The request can be made. A motion and a second can occur, but it has to happen at full board business report when she gives her committee reports. Sure, anything is possible.
So the initiation of this subject is just a little backwards from usual. Usually a public member would come to the board and bring up the subject, and in this case, the board came to, not came to the public, but the board brought up the subject.
Yes.
Is that the,
pretty much.
That's the bottom line?
Yeah, but I think so at the board meeting, I think what I'll do is see if we can make a motion. I'll talk to Marie and see if we can make a motion to notify our council rep that we had this meeting, to send the information so that they can see all the studies, all the information, and then hopefully
They got this, by the way, Antonella. Whenever our board does the committee
You
meeting.
totally just interrupted her. You don't let
I'm
anyone
sorry.
interrupt you.
I'm
You
sorry.
totally
I was trying to help
interrupted
her. I apologize.
Thanks for
I
your
was
help.
trying to
You
help.
gotta let her finish. Thanks.
Okay, I'm sorry. I
No,
just
no,
wanted to let her know.
That's
Yeah, they
fine.
got
So I think what we'll do is we'll send, I would like us to send this committee meeting video, so that they have all the studies, they have all the information, and they're on notice. They're on notice that our drinking water is actually not safe. And there's a governmental report actually, actually stating that via science.
There's much more than he brought up. I know of a lot more than he brought up.
Of course, and I think
our water pipes are lined with a substance to protect them from the fluoride and the chlorine in the water. Our pipes would be falling apart more than they already are if they weren't lined with there's a chemical that they put in there that coats the walls of the pipes.
I didn't even know that. And here Stuart is saying that the fluoride is corroding cement, like the cement canisters that it's in. So, I mean, that's speaking to your point.
He doesn't know about what New York does to protect their water pipes. And that is to put this stuff in there. And of course, some of it comes off and we swallow that stuff too. I've been using reverse osmosis for close to 50 years.
Wow.
In all the places that I've lived because of this.
What filter to use for that? I wanted to ask him that. Reverse osmosis is just a pressure change of pushing the water through the filter. What filter gives you?
No, it's a reverse osmosis unit. So what happens is you put water into one side of a membrane.
Yes.
And by osmosis, the H2O passes through the membrane and everything else doesn't. Nothing else does. However, it uses a lot of water, because the rest of that water that doesn't go through the membrane goes down the drain. And your machine may be running, like I run it at night, so all night, and then you have the water in the morning in your tank. But all you have is H2O. It's like distilled water. It doesn't taste that great. You got to pour it from cup to cup, and so it tastes good, but it takes everything out of the water.
Wow, Dan knows a lot.
Antonella, so before we go on, every single committee meeting that goes out, the material that goes out to the board, every single piece of material, the elected officials, representatives, and the elected officials themselves receive. So that kit that was mailed out earlier went out to the elected officials. So their office did receive the material. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
No, it's fine.
I was just eager to let you know that the material, what I'm talking about, went out.
I know. Yeah. And I think it would be good, but maybe they weren't able to make this meeting. So I think it would be good for them to get it anyway, get this presentation anyway. Dominic, you wanted
So I
to,
just want to say thank you that if we abide by the letter of the law and the good structure that Florence is trying to define regarding appropriate meetings, I now see why only the zoning committee and the transportation committee have regular meetings, because the city just doesn't bring issues like this, or am I wrong? Do they bring them to the CB1 district office and we just don't hear about them? But
That would never happen, Dominic.
so my point is that I appreciate the topic and the time here in the community board. I don't think it's inappropriate. I know it may be brought in a
unorthodox.
internal way, an alternate way.
That's why we have civic groups, Dominic.
Okay,
Like
as long as it's here.
This was good for Dutch Kill Civic Association, Astoria Homeowners Association. That's what we're the community board itself is a New York City agency. You are appointed individuals by the city of New York to discuss, debate, decide, and vote. That's what a community board is. We're not a civic group. We're not a lobbying group. We're not here. That's not what the body of the group is. And what's happening in a lot of times is people think that they can change the format, but we are a New York City agency and you are all liable. You can be sued. Your emails can be taken by the city of New York. I tell anybody who's a lawyer who comes onto the board, open up a separate email, because the city of New York, if something inappropriate happens, can go into all of your private emails where you receive community board emails. I've seen it happen when I first started working here. There's a lot of things because you are an agent of the city of New York. So there are certain guidelines. I got in trouble a while back. Katie was there. I tried to stop something from happening because I was afraid that the conversation was going askew and I got in trouble. But most important thing is that you guys are safe as city representatives. I don't want any of you, getting into any kind of trouble.
We're not being recorded, are we, at this point?
Yes, we are.
We are.
Completely
Are we still on YouTube with the world?
Yes. Our board has always been and always will be transparent. We are transparent. We have always been transparent.
Certainly transparent.
And we will always be transparent. That's what we're here for.
Okay, so I know what we're going to do for this. Okay, I'm going to make a motion at the next board. We'll give them a synopsis of what happened during this presentation. I will talk to Maria ahead of time, make sure that she's okay with us forwarding the presentation to our council member. But I think this was very eye-opening. Hopefully it was eye-opening for everyone else on this committee. And Judy, shout out Mount Sinai. You guys did the study.
I saw that. I heard that. The other thing I would say too is you want to make sure as soon as that peer-reviewed article is published, that's a lot of the ammunition that you need. That's something good that you want to share as soon as possible.
Yeah, the final draft is published, and the city agency, not the city agency, the Rachel Levine, who heads NIH, I believe, apparently it's being held up by her. And I don't know if it's because of what the backlash would be once that report officially comes out, even though it's already out. It was released as a result of a lawsuit by this organization. And all the final comments have been made. And so it's not going to change from what I understand, what I've been told. So it's an official report that can be used, I guess, in a lawsuit. But I think that they're pushing for it to formally be released, but we can't wait because, like he said, if they waited 8 years or 4 years, whatever it was, if they're going to hold this the formal release of this report, more people are going to get injured by the exposure, especially not knowing and not being advised of like what's in their water. So I think it's important that we start moving. Other municipalities have done it already, so I can't see why we can't. Just my sentiments on that. I don't know, Katie, what do you think? Oh, you're still on mute. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
No, I would say I I agree with your, the steps that you're gonna take to bring this to the full board and to consult with Marie. I think it is important as citizens and board members to, find a way to notify our elected officials and our, fellow community members and New Yorkers about this issue. Because I've known about it in the back of my mind, but I didn't know all the details that we learned this evening.
It was really eye-opening. Yeah. Thank you, Katie. All right. I don't want to keep you any longer. It's already 8:30. I know you have things to do, but I will, unless anyone objects, can I motion to end the meeting at 8:30? And do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. All right. Have a great night. Thank you so much for spending the time on this. I look forward to seeing you guys on the 17th at the full board meeting. All right. Bye, everyone.
Night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.